Misty Green, and you're listening to the I Lead Misty Blue podcast, where strategy meets soul and faith finds its voice. There's something I have been thinking about lately, and honestly, I think, I know I'm getting more and more annoyed by it. Not at one person, not at one group, just at the culture of it all. Every single place I look, people seem to be studying each other, watching to determine what gets attention, what gets applause, watching to see who gets chosen and how they get chosen, and watching to see who gets celebrated, and then consciously or unconsciously adjusting themselves accordingly. The more I sit with it, the more I realize this isn't really about social media. No, no, no. Social media just exposed it. What we're watching is something far deeper. We're watching people slowly trade authenticity for performance. And I don't even think most people realize they're doing it. I think it happens gradually. You notice who gets rewarded. You notice who gets accepted. You notice who seems to have the relationship or the career or even the influence or the life that you wish you had. And before long, you find yourself paying attention to how they talk, how they dress, how they think, how they walk, how they present themselves to the world. Maybe that's human nature. Maybe we've always done it. I really don't know. What I do know is that somewhere in the middle of all of this, I found myself asking a different question. When did authenticity stop being enough? The older I get, the more I realize people spend a lot of time trying to figure out who they should be and not nearly enough time figuring out who they already are. Honestly, I don't think this started on social media. I think social media simply exposed something that has existed for a very long time. You can see it inside of families if you just look. The child who keeps the peace is often easier to receive. The child who makes everybody comfortable is often celebrated. Meanwhile, the child who asks hard questions, notices tension in the room, challenges assumptions, or refuses to pretend everything is fine often becomes too much. I think people carry that dynamic into adulthood. By the time they enter friendships, relationships, workplace dynamics, churches, even, and leadership roles, they already understand which parts of themselves tend to be welcomed and which parts tend to create discomfort. Maybe that's why I've been thinking so much about wholeness lately. I don't think human beings were ever meant to be one dimensional. Maybe that's where some of these conversations around masculinity and femininity lose me. Not because I don't think there's value in them, no, there is, but I think we've become so focused on categories that we've forgotten something much more important. Human beings were never meant to be one dimensional. The strongest women I know aren't just one thing. No, no, no. They're strategic and nurturing. They're disciplined and they're also compassionate. They can walk into a boardroom, they can navigate negotiations, they can lead organizations, they can even make difficult decisions and then go home and love their families well. And the strongest men I know, they aren't one dimensional or one thing either. They are kind and courageous. They're both empathetic and decisive. They're protective and also emotionally aware. They can lead and they can nurture, they can provide, and they can comfort. The older I get, the more I realize healthy people don't spend their lives choosing between those things. They learn how to hold all of them and how to allow those pieces to move with them through different situations. Whole people embrace every facet of themselves. And maybe that realization is what brought me back to a conversation I had years ago. See, after a meeting, it was a professional meeting, more like a coaching conversation, a female coworker, one of my peers, looked at me and said, "Green, you speak too directly. I think that's why people struggle with you." I remember being so curious because I considered this person my friend, and I asked her if I had been unprofessional, if I had been too assertive, if I were even disrespectful, and she immediately responded no. She told me that I looked people in the eye. Okay, that's right. That I asked hard questions, correct, because they were relevant. That I followed up with solutions, yes, because solutions were needed. And that I communicated too directly for people's comfort. Well, being direct is also being honest and clear. Then she told me I should try to soften my approach. I remember telling her she probably wouldn't be saying that if I were a man. And without missing a beat, she said, "Right. But Green, you're not a man." How many women have found themselves in conversations that mirror that one? That conversation has stayed with me, not because it hurt my feelings, but because it revealed something about her and something about society. The expectation wasn't that I become more professional. I'd already demonstrated that. The expectation wasn't that I become more effective. I'd already demonstrated that too. The expectation was that I become easier for people to receive. I've seen versions of that specific dynamic more times than I can count. I remember being in a professional learning years ago where we were forced to partner up for one of those icebreaker activities. I dislike icebreakers about as much as the next person, if not more. I'm always the person thinking, give me the learning and let's go, because I'm already at my next place. I'm already at the next thing I need to complete. We were asked to talk about our morning routines. The woman I was paired with talked about hitting snooze several times, loving when her puppy slept on her chest, and rushing out the door most mornings. All I could think about as she was sharing was Misty, compose your face. Don't make a face, don't make a smirk, do nothing. Compose your face. Then it happened, and she asked me about my morning routine. So I told her. I usually got up around 4 in the morning. I'd spend a couple of hours doing consulting work before making my way to the campus. I would get dressed, I would head to campus, and somewhere before the day was over, I would fit a lift in. She stared at me for a second and said, "Every day?" And I kind of chuckled and I said, "Pretty much. I mean, Saturdays I sleep until 6. And then she asked, "But do you hit snooze?" I told her I don't even set an alarm. Y'all, she looked at me like I had 3 heads. "What do you mean you don't set an alarm?" And I told her I would naturally wake up before it would go off anyway. The look on her face was priceless. Not because one routine was better than the other, and not because she was wrong, but because we were both sitting there treating our normal as that, as normal. The difference was that hers felt relatable. Mine was perceived unusual. And maybe that's been the story of my life in a lot of ways. Not because I think I'm better than anybody, not because I even think everyone should live like I do, but because I have spent years noticing this subtle expectation that capable people should somehow become less capable. Disciplined people should somehow miraculously, and for what purpose I don't know, become less disciplined. And driven people should somehow become less driven in order to make other people feel more comfortable. I've reached the point where I've decided I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not hiding a piece of me for your comfort level. I'm not saying that you have to be like me. What I am saying is don't expect me to be like you. Authenticity isn't about comparison. Authenticity is about honesty. And if we're all being honest, some people are simply wired differently. Some people move differently. They carry different levels of capacity. They thrive in structure. I'm one of those people. And some people thrive in spontaneity. None of that is wrong. The problem begins when people start apologizing for the way they were built because it makes somebody else uncomfortable. And maybe that's the realization I've been sitting with lately. People aren't uncomfortable with confidence. They aren't uncomfortable with discipline. They aren't even uncomfortable with leadership. They're uncomfortable with people who refuse to shrink, people who refuse to separate themselves into categories to fit the status quo, people who refuse to apologize for being both strong and compassionate, both disciplined and caring, ambitious and also present, strategic, but deeply human. Whole people, they are complicated. See, because whole people don't fit neatly into labels. Whole people don't fit neatly into brands, and they don't fit neatly into personas. That's why whole people make performers uncomfortable. See, authenticity cannot be copied. It can't be manufactured, it can't be generated, and it certainly can't be sustained through performance forever because, baby, that mask is going to fall off. Eventually, who we really are will always be exposed. If there is anything I hope you take away from this conversation, it's this: stop spending so much time studying who everyone else is. Stop asking who you should be. Start paying attention to the gifts that are already within you, your talents, your innate abilities. Start paying attention to who you already are. The world doesn't need another copy. It doesn't need another carefully curated persona or aesthetic. Come on, y'all. It doesn't need another version of what's already trending. It needs real, authentic people. It needs whole people. This world needs people who show up as they are, with every ounce of power and their voice backing it up. People willing to tell the truth about who they are. People willing to embrace both their strengths and their struggles. People willing to stop apologizing for the way they were built, because there has never been another me and there has never been another you. Not because you and not because I'm perfect. Not because one of us has suffered more than the other or one of us has accomplished more, but because nobody else has lived your life. Nobody else has your experiences, your perspective. No one else has your voice. If authenticity truly has no competition, then maybe the greatest gift you can give the world is not a better performance. No more meta, please. Maybe it's simply the courage to show up as yourself. This is Misty Green, and you've been listening to the I Lead Misty Blue podcast. Until next time, keep choosing impact over applause and purpose over podium. And most importantly, keep being unapologetically wholly you. Be courageous enough to show up, whole.